The Empire sealed its core gates around one human frigate. Then every warfront lost its orders. The 5 core gates slammed shut one after another, and the stars vanished behind walls of blue-white distortion. On the bridge of the human frigate, a loose steel washer swung from a thread above the navigation console and began tracing a slow circle. Grand Marshal Damas Voral watched the image from Command Vault 9 beneath the Auravex capital and felt the first clean satisfaction of the day. The human ship had entered Karis Core under an envoy flag, declined 3 demands to surrender its drive keys, and then drifted exactly where his containment geometry wanted it. Now Gate 1, Gate 2, Gate 3, Gate 4, and Gate 5 were sealed. The HFS plainspoken sat in the middle of the closed ring with nowhere to jump. "Containment confirmed," said Prefect Meron Ilex from the gate control pit. Voral rested both hands on the edge of the tactical table. 35 active warfronts glowed around the central map as narrow green bands. Supply arrows moved. Fleet markers advanced. Order traffic pulsed outward from Karis in perfect intervals. The human frigate looked embarrassingly small beside the gates. Its hull was long and almost flat, with 2 heat sails folded close to the spine and a blunt bow built around sensors rather than guns. No escort waited beyond the system. No hidden squadron appeared. Its drive plume was absent. Only a pale calibration pulse flickered from a mast near the stern at steady intervals. Voral had asked twice what the pulse was. Captain Sana Kepler had answered both times with the same sentence. A navigation datum. He had decided it was a human way of making a harmless thing sound important. "Open a channel," Voral said. A moment later, Kepler appeared above the table. She was seated sideways in her command chair because one display had been swung toward her. A dark strap crossed her shoulder. Behind her, a crew member pushed a floating maintenance case into a wall clip. Nothing on the human bridge suggested panic. Voral disliked that more than defiance. "Captain Kepler, your vessel is contained. Power down your military systems and transfer control of your jump core." Kepler looked past the camera for half a second. "No. You entered the sovereign core of an empire during an active war. At your invitation. You entered after being told your proposed inspection was rejected. I entered after being told your government would receive our warning in person." Voral felt a small tightening beneath his ribs. He had heard enough about the warning. The humans claimed the Auravex command network had a structural weakness. Their diplomats had sent diagrams, simulations, and a request for a joint engineering review. Voral's staff had studied the package and found the claim insulting. The Imperial War Directorate did not take command advice from a species whose fleets were younger than several Auravex frontier fortresses. The humans had then sent 1 frigate. That, to Voral, had settled the argument. "You have delivered your warning," he said. "It was reviewed. Your engineering bureau reviewed a copy with the timing layers removed. Because those layers are classified." "Yes." Kepler said the word without emphasis. Voral leaned closer. "And now you are sealed inside 5 core gates. That should help you understand the difference between a theoretical concern and control." On the plainspoken, the steel washer completed another slow circle. Kepler glanced at it. Then she said, "Prefect Ilex, did you close all 5 on the same core clock?" Meron Ilex turned toward Voral. The prefect was older than most of the officers in the vault and had spent 3 decades maintaining gate synchronization. He did not look offended. He looked annoyed. "All core gates share sovereign phase," Ilex said. "That wasn't my question." Voral cut in. "You are in no position to question our gate procedures." Kepler's eyes returned to him. "Then I recommend you send a low-priority command order to one of your fronts." The room went quiet for exactly long enough to become irritating. Voral gave a short laugh. "You expect us to demonstrate our command system for you?" No, I expect you to notice whether it works. The channel ended at Voral's order. He turned away from the human image and found Ilex staring down into his control well. What? Nothing yet, the prefect said. Then stop looking as if there is. A junior signals officer approached the table. Grand Marshal, Frontier Group Seln reports a delayed receipt on its last maneuver packet. Delay duration. Unclear. The receipt returned without a valid command stamp. Voral looked at the 35 green bands. One had turned amber. Resend. The officer did. At the center of the human bridge, the pale calibration pulse blinked again. Ilex's fingers moved across his gate controls. Core phase is stable. Of course it is. Gate phase is stable, Ilex corrected. The shared reference is selecting. Voral faced him fully. Selecting what? The prefect did not answer immediately. His eyes jumped between 5 columns of numbers. Another Warfront band turned amber. Then another. A burst of voices rose in the vault. Front 12 requests order verification. Siege Group Keln, the officer stopped, corrected himself before the old registry name left his mouth, and used the modern designation. Siege Group West reports command rejection. North Arc Fleet asks whether Karis has changed authentication periods. Voral's satisfaction disappeared, but not his certainty. Human interference, he said. Jam the frigate's emissions. Ilex looked up. Which emissions? All of them. That would include collision telemetry inside a sealed gate well. They are not moving. The gates are. Voral glanced toward the main display. The 5 structures were not physically rotating, but their throats continuously balanced stresses across warped space. Even closed, they were never still. Then jammed the calibration pulse. Ilex hesitated. That hesitation drew Voral down the steps, into the gate control pit. Prefect. The pulse is registered by our safety layer as a local navigation fiducial. So remove it. We can, but the gate lattice accepted it before the closure completed. Voral stared at him. Ilex enlarged a graph. 5 Aurivec synchronization lines approached one another like taut cords. A 6th line, thinner and cleaner, ran through their center. The human ship's datum has lower jitter than our emergency closure reference, Ilex said. The safety system is comparing against it. Comparing is not obeying. No. A 4th Warfront turned amber. Then a 5th. Ilex's voice lowered. Not yet. Voral returned to the main table. He ordered a test packet sent to the nearest front, a meaningless rotation instruction for a reserve picket that could be cancelled immediately. The vault watched the packet leave Karis. The signal crossed the capital relay, entered the gate authorization layer, and acquired the Imperial command stamp. For one breath, it stayed green. Then a red line cut across it. Stamp out of phase. The order vanished from the outbound queue. Nobody spoke. Voral pointed at the human frigate. Open the channel. Kepler reappeared. The bridge behind her was still calm. One crew member had opened the maintenance case and was sorting fasteners into a magnetic tray. The steel washer kept circling above the navigation console. What did you do? Voral asked. Kepler's answer came without satisfaction. We stayed still. Your signal is inside our phase lattice. You closed the gates around it. You inserted a false reference. It is not false. It is the reference our ships use to keep formation when local spacetime stops agreeing with the charts. You knew our gates would accept it. We suspected your gates might prefer the cleanest available safety datum during full closure. Suspected. That is why we asked for an engineering review. Vorel felt heat rise behind his jaw. At the edge of the table, 7 Warfront bands had turned amber. Turn it off. Kepler's expression did not change. If we remove the datum abruptly while your 5 gates are still cross-locked, they will revert to 5 emergency clocks at once. Ilex whispered something from the pit. Vorel ignored him. Is that a threat? No, it is the warning you sealed inside the system with us. A signal officer made a sound that was almost a cough. Vorel turned. 10 warfronts were amber now. 1 went red. The label beneath it changed from Order DELAYD to Command Authority Unverified. Kepler looked toward someone off-camera. Raffi marked the first rejection time. A human voice answered, marked. Vorel's hands closed into fists. How long? Kepler looked back at him. Until what? Until this affects every front. For the first time, the human captain's calm seemed less like insolence and more like measurement. That depends on how often your warfronts demand a fresh core stamp. Vorel looked at the 35 bands. I asked for a number. Kepler's gaze shifted to the map being mirrored on her display. Then she said, Grand Marshal, I think you are about to get one. The first red band was joined by 2 more. Vorel ordered the vault to stop mirroring status to the human vessel, but the command came too late to matter. Plainspoken could not read Imperial military traffic, yet it did not need to. The failure pattern was visible in the gates themselves. Each rejected stamp produced a tiny corrective flare along the inner rings, and the human sensors were close enough to count them. Ilex climbed out of the pit, carrying a portable phase slate. Grand Marshal, we should not fire on the ship. Vorel stared at him. I did not ask whether we should. The containment batteries use the same gate-safe firing solution. If the reference changes while a beam is crossing the well, the targeting correction can walk. By how much? Enough. That single word did more damage to Vorel's confidence than Kepler's warning had. He looked again at the frigate. Its weapons remained cold. Its drive remained cold. The pale pulse continued at the stern, steady as a lighthouse no one had wanted. Can we isolate the military authentication layer from gate safety? Ilex's mouth tightened. In normal operation, yes. And in full core closure. The prefect looked at the red bands. No. Vorel heard the answer and finally understood why the humans had asked to inspect timing layers rather than weapons, encryption, or fleet dispositions. The problem was not that Plainspoken had broken into Imperial command. The problem was that the Empire had built 2 systems on 1 clock, and then closed 5 gates around a ship carrying a better one. A new alert sounded. 23 Warfront bands were now red. The remaining 12 were amber. Kepler was still waiting on the channel. Vorel forced his hands open. You are going to restore our command network. Yes, she said. The immediate agreement wrong-footed him. No. No. His certainty returned in a sharp, useful form. Then this is coercion. Kepler shook her head once. Restoration has a sequence. If you want it fast, stop treating the symptom as an enemy ship. Behind Vorel, another warning tone sounded. The 24th Front lost its orders. And for the first time since he had ordered the gates sealed, Grand Marshal Damas Vorel wondered whether the cage was facing the wrong direction. Vorel did not answer immediately. A lesser commander might have ordered the batteries to fire simply to restore the shape of authority. Vorel had survived too many wars to confuse motion with control. He signaled Ilex instead. Give me the restoration sequence. The prefect brought the phase slate to the tactical table. First, we stop forcing the 5 gates to share one emergency closure state. Second, we designate a single reference. Third, we step each gate back toward sovereign phase one at a time. Fourth, the military authentication service rebuilds its command epoch. How long? If nothing else changes, several minutes. Vorel looked at Kepler. And what changes if your ship stops transmitting? Ilex answered before she could. The reference disappears before the gates have another common datum. We could get transient disagreement. Could. We have never closed all five round an active foreign formation clock. Kepler leaned back slightly. That sentence is the review we asked you to perform. Vorel wanted to hate her tone. There was not enough tone in it to hate. An officer at the far console called out. All 35 Warfront command groups now report authentication failure. The map completed its change. 35 red bands surrounded Karis Core like cuts in glass. Vorel had commanded forces on 6 of those fronts during his career. He knew what a missing order meant at the line. It did not mean every ship became helpless. It meant planned attacks paused, reinforcement schedules lost authority, weapons release updates stopped, and commanders began making local decisions without knowing what neighboring groups had been told. A centralized empire did not become weak when central command went silent. It became uncertain. Uncertainty killed discipline faster than fear. Civilian gate traffic, Vorel asked. Ilex checked. Local permits remain valid. Freight routing is delayed by the closures, but civilian authentication is not tied to the military command epoch. Kepler heard that. There is your second problem, she said. Vorel's head snapped toward her image. I did not invite another lecture. No, you invited one frigate. The words landed harder than a boast would have. She continued. Your civilian network expects local authority. Your military network expects the capital to exist every time an admiral moves a squadron. You made that choice because it was efficient. It is secure. Against forged orders, yes. Against you, apparently not. Against us too. We cannot forge your command stamps. Vorel narrowed his eyes. Then why are they failing? Because your own system is rejecting them. Ilex confirmed it with a reluctant tilt of his head. Kepler raised one hand and a diagram appeared beside her. It was simple enough to be insulting. 5 circles, a central line, and a 6th point marked PLAINSB0 Ken datum. Your gate lattice has a safety rule, she said. When a closed group disagrees about phase, it chooses the lowest noise local reference until the sovereign clock can be proven again. That prevents a bad gate from dragging the others out of alignment. Ilex stared at the diagram. That rule is not published. No. How do you know it? We watched 3 of your commercial gates recover after a stellar flare last year. Vorel looked at Ilex. The prefect's eyes stayed on the diagram. Kepler continued. Your military order stamps are stricter than your civilian permits. They require the sovereign core phase and a narrow age window. When you closed all 5 gates around us, you put the sovereign reference behind 5 emergency filters. Plainspoken's formation datum was already in the well. The gate safety layer chose the cleaner local reference. Now your military stamps arrive looking old or early depending on which gate path touched them. Turn your datum to match ours, Vorel said. We can. Do it. We need the true sovereign phase first. Ilex said, I can provide it. Kepler's eyes moved to him. Through which channel? The prefect stopped. Vorel understood 1 beat later. Any phase value sent through the sealed gate network would itself be measured against the contested reference. Ilex looked down at his slate, a hard line from capital timekeeping to gate 3. Physical, Kepler asked. Yes. Independent of gate phase. Yes. Good, use that. Vorel felt the shape of the room change. The human was not withholding an answer. She was helping his engineer find one. That did not make her less dangerous. It made the danger harder to classify. Why? He asked. Kepler looked at him. Why what? Why help us restore the system you just disabled? We did not come here to make your fronts blind. You came here during a war. We came because you are fighting a war with a command architecture that can be turned off by your own containment doctrine. By one human frigate. Today, yes. Vorel glanced toward the red map. Tomorrow. Kepler did not answer. She did not need to. Ilex began issuing engineering orders. Gate 3's hardline reference would take time to validate because no one had expected it to become the only trustworthy path in the capital system. Technicians on the gate's inner service Taurus had to open sealed access cabinets, verify local clocks, and physically compare them against the capital standard. For the next several minutes, the greatest war machine the Aurivex Empire had ever built waited on technicians with hand tools. Vorel hated the absurdity of it. He hated more that Kepler did not. On Plainspoken's bridge, Chief Navigator Raffi Enwasu lifted a water pouch, found it empty, and squeezed the last bead toward the valve with 2 fingers. The maintenance crew beside him kept sorting fasteners. The steel washer above his console made a slightly narrower circle. Vorel noticed. What is that? Kepler followed his gaze. The washer. Yes. Raffi hung it there. Enwasu looked over. Gate wells make the deck feel level when the instruments say it is. That is your instrument. No, Enwasu said. That is what reminds me not to trust one instrument. Ilex actually laughed once. Vorel did not. A priority message broke into the vault. Grand Marshal, East Spear Group requests immediate release authority. Enemy ships are moving against its outer screen. Local Defense Authority remains intact. They are asking permission to pursue beyond their assigned limit. Denied. The signals officer hesitated. We cannot send the denial with a valid central stamp. Vorel looked at the map. East Spear's marker edged toward a boundary line. Use theater authority. They do not have theater release for pursuit. Of course they did not. Vorel had spent years tightening those rules after frontier admirals turned minor incidents into expensive campaigns. Centralization had solved a real problem. Now the solution was a wall between him and his own fleet. Send an uncoded advisory. They will receive it as non-binding. Send it. The officer obeyed. Kepler watched without comment. That restraint irritated Vorel until he realized what comment she could have made. I told you so. She never said it. Gate 3's hardline reference arrived. Ilex placed the phase value beside Plainspoken's datum. The difference looked tiny. Vorel almost felt relief. Then the prefect expanded the scale. The 2 lines were separated by enough to invalidate every current military command stamp in the Empire. How can that be? Vorel asked. Closure compensation, Ilex said. Each gate added a correction when we sealed. The corrections were supposed to cancel. They did not. They did locally. Kepler said, but your command epoch is global. Ilex looked at her image and nodded slowly. The belief Vorel had carried into the day finally broke in full. He had assumed the gate network was a road, and the command network was the traffic moving across it. They were not separate. The road was also the clock printed on every military order. Show me that you can restore one path, Vorel said. Kepler's eyes sharpened. Which one? Gate 3 to East Spear. Ilex turned. Grand Marshal, that would create a mixed phase state. Can it be bounded? Kepler and Ilex answered at the same time. Yes. They looked at each other. Vorel said, "Do it." The human captain issued 3 short commands. Plainspoken did not accelerate. No weapon port opened. The only visible change was along its folded heat sails, where narrow seams brightened and then dimmed. Its formation datum shifted by a fraction. Ilex's control board erupted with warnings. Gate 3 is following. Hold it, Kepler said. I am holding. No, you are chasing. Let the safety layer settle. Ilex's hands stopped. For 2 breaths, nothing happened. Then Gate 3's phase line slid into alignment with the capital hardline. A single green path appeared through the map. Vorel ordered a new denial packet to East Spear. The command stamp formed. It crossed Gate 3. It remained valid. 34 warfronts stayed red. East Spear turned green. The signals officer exhaled audibly. Receipt confirmed. Pursuit cancelled. Vorel looked from the lone green band to the human frigate. There it was. Not destruction, not noise, not a hidden fleet. Control. One small ship inside a cage had just returned orders to exactly 1 warfront, while the other 34 remained blind. Restore the rest, Vorel said. Kepler shook her head. We can begin, but first you need to decide whether you want the old system back or a system that survives the next closure. This is not a negotiation over our doctrine. No, it is an engineering choice. You are holding 34 fronts without orders. And East Spear has just shown you the safe path. Vorel's jaw tightened. Safe on your permission. Kepler's expression changed at last, not into anger, but something colder. No, Grand Marshal, safe on yours. You sealed the gates. Your network selected our datum. Your order service rejected your stamps. We are giving you a reference clean enough to unwind it. She leaned toward the camera. If you want an enemy action, I can give you a list of things we have refused to do. Vorel said nothing. We have not altered your order content. We have not impersonated your authority. We have not touched civilian permits. We have not changed a single warfront's local defense rules. We have not fired on the batteries aimed at us. The vault stayed silent. Kepler sat back. Your cage is intact, Marshal. So is my ship. The only thing that failed is the assumption that those facts meant you were in control. The channel remained open. No one in Command Vault 9 laughed now. Ilex studied the green path to East Spear, then the 34 red paths around it. Grand Marshal, he said quietly, we should listen to the rest of the warning. Vorel dismissed everyone from the tactical table except Ilex, 3 signals officers, and the human channel. The vault did not become quiet, it became narrower. 34 red warfronts remained. East Spear stayed green through Gate 3, proof that the failure could be reversed and proof that the humans could shape the reversal. Above them, the capital's war clock continued counting as if nothing fundamental had happened. Give me the full warning, Vorel said. Kepler nodded to Enwasu. A new model appeared. It contained no secret Aurivex data. That was the first unpleasant fact. The humans had built it from commercial gate observations, public fleet movement, diplomatic transit logs, and the visible timing of imperial orders during border exercises. The second unpleasant fact was that the model had predicted a command interruption even without a human ship inside the core. A stellar flare could do it. A gate accident could do it. A deliberate closure could do it. Plainspoken had merely become the clean local reference that made the flaw impossible to dismiss. You modeled our military command system from traffic timing, Vorel said. Not the content, Enwasu replied. The dependency. Ilex enlarged a portion of the human chart. They noticed that Warfront maneuver acknowledgements bunch after core gate resynchronizations. Vorel looked at him. You noticed this too. Not as a vulnerability. We considered it normal. Kepler said, normal is where most structural weaknesses live. Vorel let the sentence pass. The proposed repair was ugly because it was simple. Restore one gate to sovereign phase. Use that gate to issue temporary theater authority keys. Let each warfront continue under local command while the remaining gates resynchronized. Once all gates were stable, central command could resume without forcing every military decision through the core clock. You are proposing that I distribute authority during a war, Vorel said. I am proposing that your fronts remain commanded while your capital has a bad day. They obey because the center is singular. They obey until the center cannot sign. Vorel's eyes returned to the red map. He knew the political argument against local authority. He had made it himself. Regional commanders accumulated loyalties. Local discretion became local ambition. Empires did not fear only enemies. They feared distance. But distance had just become 34 red lines. Alternative, he asked Ilex. We restore all 5 gates before issuing new military stamps. Time. Longer now. Gate 3 is stable, but the others have drifted farther against the human datum. Vorel frowned, because we waited. Because the lattice kept correcting around the cleanest reference. Kepler said, that is why I recommended sequence. Vorel ignored the reminder. Can we force sovereign phase across all gates at once? Ilex's face showed immediate dislike. We can issue a hard capture. Then do it. Grand Marshal. Can it be done? Yes. Kepler's voice cut in. Do not. Vorel turned to her image. You have made your recommendation. That is not a recommendation. Then call it whatever humans call an order they have no authority to give. A collision warning. Ilex looked from Kepler to Vorel. Vorel said, explain. Kepler pointed to Gate 3's green line. That gate is carrying a stable path. If you hard capture all 5, the other 4 will jump toward sovereign phase. Gate 3 will feel the correction from both sides. It may drop its lock. May. And if it does, East Spear loses the only valid command path you have. Vorel considered the risk. Then East Spear sent a new message. Enemy ships were withdrawing from its outer screen. The local commander requested permission to follow, but had obeyed the denial. The front was stable. 1 green band. 34 red. Vorel hated being shown a safe result by a system he did not control. Prepare the hard capture, he said. Ilex did not move. That is an order. The prefect's hands settled on the controls. Kepler's expression flattened. Raffi reduced datum authority by 1 step. Enwasu looked at her. That gives them less margin. It also gives Gate 3 room if the other 4 kick. Vorel stared at the human bridge. You are helping us do something you just called unsafe. I am reducing the damage from a decision I cannot stop. That was worse than defiance too. Ilex initiated the capture. All 5 gate lines snapped toward the capital reference. For an instant, the map turned white. Then Gate 4 overshot. Gate 2 followed it. Gate 5 oscillated. Warnings cascaded through the pit. 3 is slipping, Ilex said. Hold it. I cannot hold 4 corrections, and 3 independently. Kepler spoke without raising her voice. Enwasu biased toward 3, half-step. Plainspoken's heat sail seams brightened. The pale datum shifted. Gate 3 stopped sliding. Gate 4 did not. A deep vibration passed through Command Vault 9, faint but physical. Dust shook loose from a ceiling seam and landed on the black tactical table. Vorel felt the floor tremble through his boots. "Abort capture," Ilex said. "Continue." "Grand Marshal." "Continue." Gate 2 settled. Gate 5 settled. Gate 4 crossed sovereign phase, corrected back, and through a safety fault. Every containment battery around Plainspoken rotated 2 degrees in response. On the human bridge, the steel washer jerked sideways. Enwasu caught the console. "Battery solutions just moved," he said. Kepler's gaze snapped to Vorel. "Freeze your weapons. They are automated against movement. Freeze them." Vorel saw the problem at once. The batteries were tracking the frigate relative to the gate reference. The reference was moving. "Battery control, manual hold." The order went out. Too late for one mount. A containment beam flashed across the gate well. It missed Plainspoken's bow by a distance that looked large on the strategic display and very small on the human bridge. The beam struck empty space, but the human ship's forward sensors saturated in a burst of static. Enwasu ducked by reflex. Kepler did not. "Damage?" she asked. "None. Forward array resetting." Vorel waited for accusation. It did not come. Ilex aborted the hard capture. Gate 3 remained green. The other 4 fell back into red disagreement. Vorel looked at the unchanged count. 1 front restored, 34 knot. His shortcut had achieved nothing. "Freeze all containment batteries," he said. A weapons officer looked up. "Grand Marshal." "All of them. But the frigate is already contained by 5 gates. Freeze the batteries." The weapon icons around Plainspoken turned gray. Kepler saw them change. "Thank you," she said. Vorel nearly laughed at the absurdity of being thanked by the ship he had trapped. "Do not mistake that for trust." "I don't." Ilex wiped dust from his phase slate with his sleeve. "Then we use the slow sequence." Vorel nodded once. Gate 2 came next. This time Ilex followed Kepler's cadence. Plainspoken shifted its datum in tiny increments while the gate compared against the hardline. The operation looked unimpressive. No grand weapon fired. No hull strained. No one shouted. A gate changed its mind about what time it was. Then another warfront turned green. The next step restored Gate 5 and 3 more fronts whose order routes favored its relays. By the time the vault lights dimmed into evening cycle, 7 fronts could receive central orders. 28 could not. Vorel had stopped thinking of Plainspoken as a prisoner. He had not yet decided what it was instead. A signals officer broke the silence. "Priority from Outer March Group." Vorel read the header. His stomach tightened. Outer March guarded a crowded border system where Auravex and neutral habitats shared the same moon chain. The front commander had received reports of an enemy logistics concentration. Under normal doctrine, the commander needed central authorization before crossing the neutral exclusion line. The message had been sent nearly an hour earlier. The follow-up was newer. Outer March initiating preemptive cross-line action under emergency local necessity. Vorel felt every eye in the vault turn toward him. "Send immediate recall." "No valid path," the signals officer said. "Their route depends on Gate 4. Use Gate 3 and relay through East Spear. Military stamp will expire before the cross route completes. Civil channel. Non-binding." Vorel looked at the timer attached to the Outer March movement estimate. Not enough time for the slow sequence. Ilex looked sick. "Gate 4 is our unstable one." Kepler had already pulled the front geometry onto her display. "How many civilian habitats inside the exclusion volume?" she asked. Vorel did not answer. The signals officer did. 4 major, several small. Kepler looked at Enwasu. If 4 opens to transit aperture, we can put Plainspoken on the throat line and give Ilex a direct phase bridge. Ilex turned sharply. You would have to move. Yes. The containment solution forbids movement. Vorel looked at the grey battery icons. He understood the next fact before anyone said it. To stabilize Gate 4 fast enough, the human frigate had to move toward the only opening in the cage. If Gate 4 reached transit aperture, Plainspoken would have a jump path out of Karis core. Ilex said, Grand Marshal, if we attempt this, they can leave. Vorel looked at Kepler. The human captain met his eyes. Open Gate 4, she said. You expect me to create your escape route. I expect you to decide whether containing 1 frigate matters more than recalling a fleet before it crosses a civilian line. Vorel's hands were still dusty from the ceiling grit. He looked at the 35 Warfront bands, 7 green and 28 red. Then at the grey containment batteries. Then at the small human ship that had not fired once. Gate 4, he said. Begin opening sequence. The inner ring brightened. A narrow corridor of stars appeared where the blue-white wall had been. Plainspoken's drive came alive. Every officer in Command Vault 9 stopped breathing for 1 beat. The frigate moved directly toward the opening. Plainspoken accelerated for 3 seconds. Vorel saw its drive flare, saw the opening ahead of it widen, and knew that every officer in the vault expected the human captain to run. The frigate did not. It crossed half the distance to Gate 4, rotated 90 degrees, and stopped broadside to the throat. Its folded heat sails opened. They were not sails in the old sense. They were broad thermal surfaces threaded with formation coils, built to spread waste heat and hold a clean navigation datum across a squadron. In the compressed geometry of the gate well, they became a stable reference plane. Ilex made a sound of surprise. She is giving the gate more baseline. Kepler's voice came through the channel. Prefect, you have direct line now. Take sovereign phase from the hardline. Compare against us. Do not force the correction. Ilex bent over the controls. Gate 4 continued opening. The star corridor widened behind Plainspoken. Its jump drive was hot. Vorel could see the escape solution forming on his own display. The human ship needed only to rotate, push forward, and vanish beyond the core perimeter. Instead, it held station. Phase difference falling, Ilex said. 4 is accepting capital reference. Outer March recall, Vorel asked. Queued. Send the instant the stamp validates. The vault waited. Plainspoken's open heat sails glowed dull red along their inner seams. The steel washer on Enwasu's thread stopped circling and began swinging in a short arc. Almost, he said. Ilex's hands hovered above the board without touching it. Gate 4's phase line approached the hardline. For the first time that day, Vorel understood why Kepler had kept telling his people not to chase the numbers. The gates were not machines to be bullied into agreement. Every forced correction created another correction somewhere else. The line settled. Gate 4 turned green. Send recall. The order left Command Vault 9 with Vorel's personal stamp. It crossed the restored gate, entered the military relay, and reached outer march before its commander crossed the neutral exclusion line. Receipt confirmed. Movement halted. No habitat was fired upon. Vorel exhaled slowly. Behind the human frigate, the gate was now open enough for escape. Kepler remained where she was. You can leave, Vorel said. Yes. You are not leaving. Not while my datum is still carrying part of your recovery. Vorel looked at Ilex. The prefect nodded. If they jump now, 4 should remain stable, but 2 and 5 will see a reference step. Dangerous. Manageable. Kepler heard him. Manageable is not the same as necessary. Vorel studied her face. He had spent the morning trying to discover the weapon hidden inside one human frigate. The answer was finally obvious. The weapon was not the formation datum. It was the discipline to stop, using capability at the point where advantage became harm. "Captain," he said, "what would you do if I ordered the batteries unfrozen?" Kepler glanced at the gray icons. "Ask you why. And if I ordered them to fire?" "Protect my ship." "Could you keep the command network down while doing that?" A pause. "Yes." No threat followed. Vorel believed her. That was the moment the last part of his old model failed. A dangerous ship was not merely one that could destroy a target. Plainspoken had been more dangerous while refusing to destroy anything because every Auravex response had revealed another dependency. Sealing the gates had exposed the clock. Hard capture had exposed the targeting link. The emergency at Outer March had exposed the political cost of central authority. The humans had not brought a larger gun to Caris. They had brought a ship designed to keep working when shared references failed. The Empire had built a war machine that required the center to be right. "Prefect," Vorel said, "how many gates must return before we can issue temporary theater authority independent of the core epoch?" Ilex looked at him carefully. 1, if the authority package is signed locally and distributed through civilian-safe routing. Vorel almost smiled at the cruelty of the answer. They had restored enough nearly an hour ago. "Prepare it." A signals officer stiffened. "Grand Marshal, Theater Authority without central renewal violates Continuity Article 6. "I know. It requires War Directorate concurrence. The War Directorate currently cannot issue a valid military order to 27 fronts." 28, another officer corrected. Ilex looked at the map. "Gate 4 restored 4 routes. We are at 11 green." Vorel nodded. "Then the Directorate can concur after it regains the ability to disagree." He turned to the record console. "Open emergency doctrine file. New instruction." The recorder lit. Vorel spoke slowly. "Effective immediately, every active Warfront command receives a locally renewable defense and withdrawal authority that does not expire with loss of Caris phase. Offensive movement across neutral or sovereign boundaries remains restricted without theater concurrence. No core gate closure may be ordered as a vessel containment measure, while military authentication depends on the same closure group." The signals officer stared at him. Vorel continued. "Add this. Central command loss is not evidence of theater disobedience. Local commanders are required to preserve civilian protections, defensive continuity, and neighboring coordination until sovereign command is restored." He looked at Kepler. "Anything else?" The human captain considered the question. "Yes." Several officers bristled. Kepler ignored them. "Do not make our datum part of your permanent fix." Ilex blinked. "Why not?" "Because then you would replace one dependency with another." The prefect sat back. Vorel let out one short breath that might have become laughter on a different day. "Record that too," he said. Kepler shook her head. "That part is free." The emergency authority package was built from systems the Empire had trusted precisely because they were too local to matter. Civilian gate permits, theater identity certificates, physical hardline clocks, regional defense keys. Ilex and Enwasu worked together to define a tolerance wide enough for local renewal and narrow enough to reject forged central orders. They did not redesign the Empire in an hour. They created a bridge that did not require the capital to sign every step across it. The first package went to East Spear. Its commander acknowledged. The second went through Gate 4 to Outer March. Its commander acknowledged and formally cancelled the preemptive cross-line action. Then the package propagated outward. 11 green fronts became 16. 16 became 22. The change was different from the earlier restoration. Those fronts did not turn green because Karis had recovered control. They turned green because command authority now existed where the ships actually were. Vorel watched the process with a discomfort he chose not to hide. "Does this weaken the Empire?" he asked Ilex. The prefect thought before answering. "It weakens the center's exclusivity." That was not my question. "No," Ilex said. "I think it makes losing the center less important." Vorel looked toward Kepler. "That was your objective." "Our objective was to stop you from discovering this during a larger war." "We are already in a larger war." "Not with us." The room went still. Vorel had almost forgotten the diplomatic reason plainspoken had entered Karis Core. Border incidents between Orovek's patrols and human shipping had been worsening for months. His own staff had argued that a quick seizure of human transit stations would force concessions before their navy concentrated. The plan assumed Orovek's command superiority. Vorel looked at the 35 Warfront bands as more of them changed status. "How many human frigates carry formation datum systems like yours?" Kepler answered, "Most ships that expect to travel with other ships." "Not a secret weapon. Not even a rare system." Vorel's earlier invasion plan seemed to shrink on the table. "If we had engaged your border forces," he said, "would they have done this?" "Not exactly this." "What would they have done?" "Something appropriate to the problem in front of them." He believed that too. Gate 2 was ready for controlled restoration. This time, no one suggested hard capture. Plainspoken reduced its datum authority by a measured step. Ilex let the gate settle. The phase line aligned without alarms. More central routes returned. But Vorel no longer waited for them. "Send a strategic hold to all front commanders as soon as their local authority package validates," he said. "No new offensive operations for one cycle. Existing defensive actions continue. Border fleets open contact channels with their opposing commands." The signals officer turned, including the human border. "Especially the human border." Kepler said nothing. Vorel faced her image. "You came under an envoy flag. I converted your visit into a containment action." "Yes. I am terminating that action." "Understood." "Your ship will retain its drive control and weapons control. Gate 4 will remain open. You may depart when Prefect Ilex confirms the lattice no longer depends on your reference." Kepler nodded once. "That works." No triumph. For the first time, the Vault's order tone was silent by design rather than failure. No officer rushed to restart it. Ilex kept watching the local clocks, and the signals staff watched acknowledgements arrive through routes that did not begin at Karis. Vorel noticed how strange the quiet felt. It was not the absence of command. It was command existing in more than one place now. Vorel found himself grateful for it. The last red warfront did not turn green through central command. It received a local authority package from a neighboring theater, validated it against its own defense clock, and acknowledged Karis with a plain text receipt. 35 fronts had lost their orders. 35 now had authority that could survive losing them again. Ilex restored Gate 5. Then Gate 1. The core lattice returned to sovereign phase, but the new theater keys remained active. At last, the display beside Plainspoken changed from reference required to reference optional. Enwasu reached up and touched the thread above his console. The steel washer, which had drawn circles through the entire containment, hung almost straight. Kepler closed the heat sails. Vorel looked at the 5-gate clocks on Ilex's board. They no longer showed one compulsory emergency reference. Each displayed its own local hold beside the shared sovereign time. 5 clocks. 1 agreement. No single failure required silence. Vorel reached for the control that would have rearmed the containment batteries. He passed over it and opened the diplomatic channel instead. Beyond Command Vault 9, 35 distant commanders began answering for their own lines. On Plainspoken, the steel washer stopped moving.